Привет! Kiel vi fartas? That's just a little introduction to what we'll be talking about today. Honestly, this video has been requested. People want to know more about my personal story, my journey. I've shared little bits and pieces in videos, but today I'm going to dive deep. I'm going to be really raw and open with you about my life, because I feel like this gives us permission to have a dialogue and an interaction. So I hope you'll enjoy getting to know all about my salsa dancing and being born in Siberia and my twists and turns in my life, and that you will take the moment to then introduce yourself so that I can get to know you better as well. So it's obviously really weird to summarize your entire life in like a few minutes, but I'm gonna try at least to give the highlights, because I feel like when we get to know people, it helps us understand their context and where they come from, so that we can actually feel like whether we resonate, or whether we appreciate their journey a little bit more, or maybe we realize that we can't resonate and appreciate, and in that case, it's not a match, right? So I was born in Russia, in Tomsk, Siberia. I came to the US when I was 12. And we left Russia because my dad really wanted to get to a place of greater freedom. We were Jewish. Well, my dad is Jewish. My mom is actually half Ukrainian, half Belarusian, so I'm not Russian at all. But he was able to apply on a refugee status to different places, and we almost ended up in Israel. In the end, finally got the permission to come to the US, ended up in San Francisco because my dad had learned this language and then started teaching an international language called Esperanto. And him and my mom met in his Esperanto classes, and he knew this person back from his early Esperanto days, who had moved to San Francisco. And so that was our sponsor. We ended up basically coming here because of Esperanto. It's really interesting because I'm one of the rare people that speaks Esperanto from birth. So I spoke two languages from birth, Russian and Esperanto. And this has a lot to do with informing me in different perspectives, to be totally honest. And that could be a whole Lana TV episode, is how to be able to move out of the perspective that you know and into a new way of looking at things. I feel like I've kind of had to do that my whole life, both because I spoke these different languages and because I was from mixed culture. I know that probably Jewish and Russian doesn't seem like such a different culture, but the anti-Semitism was really rampant in Russia, and my cultural background, not religious background, but cultural background, is extremely Jewish, and everything that comes from that lineage, including being chased by the Nazis, including the Holocaust and the version of it in Russia with Stalin, and all of these histories that are in me, even though I might look and talk like a California girl, right? So we came to this country, and at 12, my whole world stopped. I didn't speak English. I had to basically be in a place where I was not considered smart, not considered talented or beautiful. I mean, I had short boy hair, I had big glasses, I was bullied all through 7th grade and most of 8th grade. Bullied is really too strong of a word. I feel like mostly I was not noticed, and when I was noticed, it was for the weirdness that I had. And so those were some of the toughest years, and they were also really formative for me, to feel like I don't belong, like I'm a total foreigner and I don't matter, to have to really adapt to a culture that felt at best foreign to me, at worst sometimes really fake and uncomfortable. I felt like my Russianness and my bluntness and my directness and the way that I expressed myself wasn't welcome. It was considered rude, just me being me the way that I've been up until that point. And so it really informed me of what it's like to feel excluded, to feel like you don't belong, to feel really alone and lost and miserable. And has now been a great gift to me in my life, right? Because I can relate to people who have been in a similar situation, even if I can't understand fully their perspective. So as I entered high school and I started to become more beautiful and, got contacts instead of wearing glasses, and my accent started going away, I had to work really hard to get into the AP classes and to really kind of catch up to where I was. Now, I am really privileged in a way that my dad has a PhD education, my mom has a master's education. So even though I'm an immigrant, I came with these highly educated parents that really pushed in many ways the point into us, into my brother and I, that education was my way out of this. And so I worked extremely hard at school. And even as I started having more growing into my own person and starting to see things, patterns in my family that weren't healthy, and my parents did end up getting divorced when I was 19, I started not knowing how to deal with my emotions. My eating disorder started in high school, but I, again, worked extremely hard to chase this American dream. It was like, I'm gonna make it if I can have a job where I'm totally, getting paid well, have these opportunities. I wanted to do this for my heritage. I wanted to do this as a woman. I wanted to do this as an immigrant. I mean, there were lots of reasons why I worked myself to the bone. And so through my parents getting divorced in college, through major glaring patterns of pain coming up for healing in me during college, I still managed to graduate from UC Berkeley with a 3.8 GPA. I still don't know how I did it because it was some of the most miserable time in my life. But it also led to this opening. I dated an amazing partner who encouraged me to seek therapy. I started therapy. I started yoga, which yoga has been such a transformative force in my life. Around 19, I think it was as a freshman that I started yoga, which led me to meditation and to all of the things that I've done since that have been incredible. And so it was the best of times and the worst of times. But what happened after I graduated college is I got all these job offers. I had 5 job offers out of college in all of these investment banks. And I ended up taking the one with Citigroup in San Francisco, and spent the next 2 years really proving myself and really working super hard to climb up this ladder, and got a lot of success in that. And at the same time, the more money I made, the more praise I got, the more accomplishments I had, the more I felt like I had to surrender who I was. I wasn't allowed to have feelings. I really had to become like super compartmentalize. I can't even say that word because I can't compartmentalize in my life. I had to cut off my emotions and really become hardened in many ways and soulless. At least for me, that's what it felt at the time. And so I reached a point where my eating disorder was worse than ever. I was binge eating. I was miserable. I didn't know how to get help besides the ways that I was already seeking help. I realized I needed to pause. So I saved all my money. I left Citigroup, which was incredibly painful and disappointing to my parents. And I went on this now multi-year journey of discovering myself. So I left the Bay Area, moved to Southern California, left a relationship where I felt like I was repeating a lot of patterns that I saw between my parents, and really full on started doing the healing work. So I got back into yoga. I got back, I didn't mention that I also used dance as a huge escape. I did ballroom when I was really young in Russia. Then that got put aside. And in college, I had this like polarization. I had the extreme pressure that I put on myself and the misery that I felt of not being good enough, of not being smart enough, of not being talented, that self-hatred I felt and the misery. And at the same time, I had these releases in yoga and through salsa dancing. I did salsa dancing professionally in a dance company, and meditation and all of this exposure. So that eventually just I needed to break that tearing apart that I had, the polarization within myself. And so as I moved to Southern California, I took a huge pay cut and took a job with Inside Track, where I was a success coach for university students. My position was at Chapman University, and I met all these incredible people from all over the world, all walks of life, that were super talented, passionate about basically life coaching for college students. Ended up getting a lot of training there. It was such an expansive year. Somebody in that company was the person that gave me the movie The Secret, where I got introduced to Michael Beckwith years later, visited Agape Center for years, volunteered mentored, worked there, introduced me to Abraham-Hicks, Esther Hicks, Law of Attraction. I mean, it was an incredible expansion. Yet I was running through my savings, making less money than I have ever been. I decided to leave that job and to get trained in yoga, become a yoga teacher, which was like a dream of mine for many years. And I ended up doing this training in Mexico, which is a whole other video to do about the expansion that happened there. But one of the things that happened is I had this amazing yoga teacher that introduced me to shamanism, and specifically Siberian shamanism. And also another teacher there introduced me to Law of Attraction in a deeper way and gave me some CDs of Abraham-Hicks recordings. And this breaking open happened to where I started to see how reality isn't what I had imagined or felt it to be. I finally felt that there was a way out of this powerlessness that I had been feeling. And it was a huge wake-up call and a huge expansion. And then my whole life fell apart even more after this. It completely ran through my savings. I met my husband while I was in Southern California, but really, I think in many ways, I was looking for a savior and he didn't want to play that role, thank God. And I knew I didn't want to get into that dynamic. So I ended up moving back and tail between my legs. I mean, in my early 20s, I was the wealthiest out of all my friends, working at Citigroup, flying all across the world, business class, blah, blah, blah. And at like 28 years old, I felt like I had to come back with a tail between my legs, move into my parents' house and deal with so much anger and pent up emotions that I had with both individually, my mom and my dad, and with myself, completely unemployed, no money, applying to grad schools. And it was the hardest time that I had faced, I think, up until that point, because I really got suicidal. I mean, I wasn't serious about making plans to kill myself, but I felt like I had nothing to live for. I was a huge disappointment to everyone around me. I was no good. And yet I felt that there is this mission in me. I'm going to tear up. There was this energy, and I just kept thinking, I have so much to give. I have so much to give. Let me find a way to share it. Let me find a way to be a powerful, positive influence on this planet, or at the very least in my own life. And there was this dream of a family, and I couldn't get a whiff of a family. My now husband, we had broken up when I went back to my parents. And so I poured my entire energy into my graduate school at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Palo Alto. And it was so much healing there. But right before I went and started grad school, after months of being broken up, my husband had a huge spiritual awakening, drove to the Bay Area without even stopping. Like, to be TMI here, he actually peed in a bottle. He was in that much of a rush. He showed me, he like didn't want to stop. He showed up on my doorstep and he basically proposed to me and told me that fear has been keeping him from fully committing and diving in. And the reason I'm sharing this is because he ended up proposing to me a few months into the program. I started the program in August, my graduate program. In December, my husband proposed to me. In January, he quit his job and moved up to the Bay Area to be with me. And in February, we found out, towards the end of February, that we're pregnant. And I think it was early March when we found out it's twins. I mean, it was boom, 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 boom.